Okay, so hello everyone. This is session 1 of our new 3-part series that's all about how to start an aerospace business with limited resources. This session is the first of 3, and this one will cover technology transfer, SBIRs, and non-dilutive funding. And so we'll have 2 speakers during this. One of them will be myself, and the other one will be Dennis Wanaka. And so this program is planned and supported by AIAA Los Angeles Young Professional Society, as well as the IEEE Los Angeles and Orange County sections. And we're always seeking new volunteers and new members. So if you're interested in volunteering or participating in any events, you can contact any of the 3 contacts below for AIAA and for IEEE. Just some quick announcements first. We have a few upcoming events for AIAA. The first being an e-happy hour later this week on Thursday from 6:30 to 8, where people can just mingle and network with other aerospace professionals. And then the other is a Mysteries on Mars STEM outreach event via Zoom, where there'll be lots of discussions about latest Mars missions, the mysteries around the red planet, and then a Q&A following as well. So look forward to those events. And the Mars event will also have another raffle for some Amazon gift cards, just like this event will have at the end. So the agenda for our session today. First, I'll be speaking, and my topic will be just an overview of tonight's subjects, and then I'll do a deep dive into the technology transfer process and non-dilutive funding. And then I'll introduce Dennis Wanaka, and he will then be doing a deep dive into the SBIR process and how government funding awards, such as SBIRs, work. Then we'll do a quick Q&A session with both of us. And then at the very end, we'll do a raffle for 2 different $50 Amazon gift cards. So make sure you stick around until the end if you want to stay for the raffle. So first, I'll introduce myself. My name is Brett Cornick. I have a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from USC and a master's degree in material science from UCLA. And since getting my undergraduate degree, I now have just over 4 years of experience at a few different Los Angeles-based technology startups commercializing material technologies. I've been involved in the commercialization process for over 10 technologies that have been licensed through technology transfer. And I've also served as a core team member on multiple SBIR awards and authored multiple proposals as a principal investigator. Currently, I'm the head of technology at a small company called Epic Advanced Materials in Los Angeles. And I'm also the Young Professionals Chair for the Los Angeles, Las Vegas section of AIAA. So let's just jump in. What is technology transfer? So technology transfer, by definition, is the transfer of knowledge, data, or intellectual property from a university or agency to the public. And so what this means is generally any type of research institution like a university or say a government-funded lab such as Air Force Research Laboratory or Navy Research Laboratory, they're developing a whole bunch of technologies that then can be transferred to different private commercial entities that can work on commercializing that technology. And so this is usually done through a formal licensing process, and there are many different steps to the technology transfer process that starts with the researcher conducting the research. And then once they find some type of research or technology that is of note, they report that to their institution that they work for. And then those institutions basically put these technologies up for sale, for lack of a better word, to different small business organizations that can commercialize these technologies for their own profit and to get the technology out into the public. So entrepreneurs that are looking to start their own small business are mostly just concerned with this the negotiation and commercialization steps here, but should be aware of all of the other steps as well. And so most different universities and agencies have some sort of tech transfer program. So the DoD, DOE, NASA, any public research university or private research university will also have some sort of technology transfer program as well. And pretty much anyone can license the technology, but it is up to the inventor and the owner of the IP. And so the owner of the IP is usually the university or lab. It's up to them who they decide they want to license to. And the most common licensee is a small business. And then SBIR, the next topic of tonight, what is it? So SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research, and these are award programs that basically encourage small businesses to engage in federal research and to commercialize the technology that they develop as part of these programs. And so these awards help the government to reach to different research and development goals, and also fosters the development of small businesses that are often, maybe outclassed by some of the larger businesses in the field. It allows different companies that have maybe 10 to 30 employees to compete with some of the large government prime contractors like Lockheed Martin or Boeing, and to work not just to compete with them, but also to work collaboratively with them. And so many different agencies do post SBIR solicitations at various times in the year. This includes DoD, DOE, EPA, NASA, many more. And in order to apply for these programs, you have to qualify as a small business. And then that comes with a few different details. And all work performed during an SBIR award remains wholly owned by the small business. So it allows a small business to develop technologies with funding from a government source that they don't have to pay back, while still maintaining the rights to their technology. And so Dennis will go much deeper into SBIRs and the process during his presentation. And so then the third topic of tonight is non-dilutive funding. And so non-dilutive funding really is any type of money that a business can receive that does not dilute its shares. So you don't have to give up any equity. So this takes on many forms. Key one here is grants, because you don't have to pay that money back, but it can also come in the form of loans, royalties, tax credits, crowdfunding. We're going to focus mostly on grants because this is the smartest avenue to go when trying to find funding to start your business, because you don't have to pay it back. And so SBIR awards are an example of non-dilutive funding. And so how can these resources together help you to start a business? Well, so technology transfer, it can help you to gain ownership to a technology that's at a higher TRL. And TRL stands for Technology Readiness Level, which is a scale that basically evaluates how ready a technology is to commercialize and turn into a viable product. So by licensing a technology from a research organization through technology transfer, you're able to bypass a lot of the initial R&D work and start with a technology that may already be at a level of 4 or 5 on the TRL scale. And I know that Dennis will also talk more about TRL in his presentation. And so technology transfer can provide you with the technology, and then SBIR awards and other non-dilutive funding can help to provide you with the money that you need to do a lot of the initial business development and R&D work. And so these are two of the most important parts of starting a small business. There's many programs in place to be able to get these parts under your control to start your own venture. So now a little bit of a deeper dive into technology transfer and the technology transfer process, and some of the key questions that I'll try to answer here and that you should ask yourself when going through this process is: how do you find the right tech, and how do you know it's the right tech? What is the licensing process for a specific organization? How can you make yourself an attractive licensee and build credibility? And then how are different licensees selected? How much will this cost? Because there is usually a cost associated with transferring a technology or buying the rights to a technology. And then what do I do if I have interest in a technology, but it clearly needs more R&D work before it'll be ready to be commercialized? So I'll attempt to answer the rest of these questions in the coming slides. So first of all, how to find a licensable technology. My favorite way to do this is to just actually look at different research papers for topics that I'm interested in online. Generally, if a professor at a university puts out a research paper on a certain topic or technology, then if you contact the technology transfer office for that institution and that technology is pretty likely to be available for licensing unless someone else has already gotten to it. So you can contact the different university and agency tech transfer offices. They all pretty much have websites, and you can find a catalog of available technologies, usually online. So for example, this is for USC's tech transfer office. This is the link to go and check out some of the tech that they have available. And lots of times there can be hundreds of different items in this technology transfer catalog, and it's up to you to just take a look at it and find what is in your wheelhouse and what's of interest to you and what you think could have some commercial potential. Also, if you're serious about trying to license a technology, phone calls are definitely the best way to find out information as opposed to just working exclusively over email, because lots of times there can be technology available by an institution that is not actually posted on their technology transfer catalog page. So phone calls to the technology office, if you're serious about one of the technologies they have, can always provide more information. And then there are also some companies out there like Tech Connect and Tech Link that provide services to try and assist with the technology transfer process and to try and help identify different marketable, commercializable technologies. So there's lots of resources available to find licensable tech, and a lot of it, most of it can be done, just straight from your computer behind your desk. So it takes some effort, but it doesn't take getting out of the house. And then the bottom here is just a picture of the very top of NASA's technology patent portfolio, very easily searchable. And so here's a very simplified outline of the licensing process. The first step is to obviously find a technology that you're interested in, preferably in a field that you're also familiar with. And then you contact the technology transfer office with your interest, and be sure to also inquire about any related technologies that are either available or perhaps had already been licensed to other people. And then is the contract negotiation process, which is it can be pretty lengthy and long and can take some time and a lot of back and forth. And then after you have your contract negotiated and you're able to own the IP for this technology, then you begin with your commercialization efforts. And those will usually be dictated by certain benchmarks or goals that you may have set out in your licensing negotiation process. And then once you revisit those benchmarks and goals as you're commercializing, you may realize like, oh, this actually doesn't have the same product market fit that I expected, or actually this technology isn't as far along as I expected it to be. And so maybe then you decide that it needs further research. And you may want to work further with the university to develop a project to advance that research. So how do you build credibility and make yourself an attractive licensee? So first of all, you should be able to demonstrate some knowledge in the field for the technology that you're licensing. So, if you have a degree in chemistry, but you're out there trying to license a technology for some kind of optical technology, for instance, you're going to want to be able to show that you actually do have some knowledge or expertise or experience in that area, because the contract office or the technology transfer office will likely evaluate you as high risk if you do not really have any knowledge or expertise in the area for which you'll be commercializing. Also, leverage consultants and advisors on your team, and I put these in quotations because when you're starting out as a small business, you might have a team of yourself and 2 other friends or mentors that you can turn to for help or advice, but maybe they're not, maybe you haven't fully pulled a company together, they're not fully on your team yet. Well, you can leverage them and their expertise when trying to pitch yourself to the technology transfer office as having a team of qualified professionals behind you. make sure you're always upfront and transparent about how much progress you've made, in incorporating your business, but make sure to leverage the relationships that you might have with the experts and coworkers in your network. You also have to demonstrate that you are willing and able to devote a lot of time to this project. They typically will not want to transfer a technology to someone that is just going to be doing this for a couple hours a week as a side hobby. That's a big red flag there, because no work will ever get done. So make sure you're able to demonstrate that you can devote a good amount of your time to this. And any past experience with commercialization efforts or product development is also a big help. And so our session 2 of this series, which is going to be at some point later in November, is going to go into much more detail on this topic and how to build credibility and leverage consultants in your network to help build your business. So then some additional tips and info. Prices for technology transfer agreements can range from seriously free. There are a few NASA technologies that are free for anyone to license and don't even actually require a formal agreement, to they can be several thousands of dollars. And so this will really depend on the technology itself, as well as a bunch of different factors, including, what commercial sector are you looking to serve? What region are you looking to serve? Are you going to require heavy involvement from the researcher who invented the technology? And these are things that you can bake all of these into your license agreement to help kind of change the price or alter the price and the amount of support, and where you're going to focus your efforts when trying to commercialize the technology. My recommendation is, if you're just starting a business around this one tech, then you should choose a very narrow commercial sector, say, aerospace or structural components of an airframe or something for a technology, and a very narrow region, at least narrow as narrow as the country, perhaps even more narrow than that. And this will allow you to license the technology for a pretty low cost, while still keeping your focus where you're most comfortable. And the most focused startups are the most likely to succeed. So if you try to solve everyone's problem all at once, then you're probably not going to actually succeed as a business. So these are agreements that can be changed as you find some commercial success. So focusing very narrowly to start is probably the best tactic. Also, if you do anticipate a good amount of R&D that will be required on a technology, but you like it and you think it will eventually have commercial success, you can bake into your technology transfer agreement a level of involvement from the researcher or original inventor. And that can be used to provide a good amount of research support, even if you don't maybe have the personnel on your team to conduct the research. And so as far as pairing technology transfer with SBIRs, this is kind of a simplified model here, but it still works for some big picture ideas. When paired together, technology transfer and SBIR awards can really help create a starting point for a business without needing to use a whole lot of capital resources or perform a whole lot of R&D internally within the business. The way this does this is the technology transfer provides the product or the technology at a fairly high technology readiness level. And then the SBIR, or non-dilutive funding opportunity, provides the funding. And in the case of an SBIR, it can also help provide the market fit because it usually targets a specific government customer in SBIR solicitations. So, pairing these things together can prove to be a successful model for trying to ideate at least around starting your own small business. So just some examples of what I'm talking about there. Here are some example SBIR solicitations from about 3 or 4 years ago, as well as some technology transfer opportunities that were available that could help to satisfy, say, one of these solicitations. So there was one for self-healing, self-routing wiring. And at the same time, NASA had a technology opportunity available for transfer for in situ wire damage detection and rerouting system. So you can see how, those two together, you have the technology there, and then you have a potential funding source. Same with the one further down, extended service life of transparent armor, pairs really well with polymer coatings for enhanced and field repairable transparent armor. Interestingly here, this solicitation was put out by the Navy, and the technology transfer was being posted by the Naval Research Laboratory. So also never assume that the agency communication is as good as you think it is, because there's lots of technologies I've noticed that are available that seem to satisfy a certain need of a related agency. So if you're making the connections, then good for you, and don't assume that other people have made those same connections. And then so this last one, electronically dimmable eye protection devices. This is for visors for fighter pilots. And then a technology transfer pairing from university for energy efficient optoelectronic smart window from the University of Illinois. And so, like I said, this is a simplification of a pairing process to start your own business, but it is really good to ideate and allow you to see what technologies are out there available and what the needs of the different government agencies are. And once you start trying to pair these together, you can kind of see what technologies are worth focusing on and which might be a good target for commercialization. And then the last thing that I really wanted to touch on is another non-dilutive funding source, and this is the NSF I-Corps program. And so this program is, like I said, it's a non-dilutive funding source that provides $50,000 to the teams that it accepts for customer discovery efforts. And this is aimed for very early stage startups and for university groups. And what it is focused on doing is trying to evaluate a product market fit between a promising technology and who the actual customer would be. So they are doing this program because they've found over the years that there's a very big gap that exists between researchers, research labs, and the people that are inventing the technologies and the actual commercializable product and the market that technology would allegedly serve. Lots of times, research teams or potential entrepreneurs will spend a whole lot of time developing a technology that they think is really promising and not even speak to a potential customer for a good amount of time until it's way too late in their process to really pivot quickly. And so this program is focused around trying to turn the customer discovery process into a very, very early stage step for a business to embark on. And so it's centered around performing a whole bunch of different stakeholder interviews. And so I've done a couple of the small local programs that help you to qualify for the national program here. And essentially what you do is you contact any type of stakeholder or customer. So it could be anyone in the supply chain, anyone who might interact or have any influence over your potential technology or product. And you just ask them a series of questions to try and test your hypotheses about your product market fit. And so the national program has you do 100 of these interviews. And by the end of it, you will have a pretty good view of whether or not your program or your technology or your efforts are valid for commercializing a realistic technology. So I just wanted to give some insight into this program because the few small local programs that I've done around this methodology I've found extremely helpful for some of the business development that I've been doing at the company that I work at. And so if you're interested, the local NSF nodes, there's an LA node, I know for a fact, they provide these introductory programs and they're free. You just have to apply and submit an application. And they seem to happen on a rolling basis every couple months. And they can provide you a lot of information with just how to do customer discovery, how to evaluate a product market fit, and help you evaluate whether or not the technology that you think is so promising in your head actually finds a potential use out in the commercial market. And so that is it for me. So now I'll introduce Dennis Wanaka, who is our next speaker. And he is, I have a few bullet points here, but his experience is a bit too vast to try and summarize in just a few bullet points. But the short of it is he has 40 years of experience in advanced technology development in aerospace. He's the founder of 4 separate technology companies. And has presented, moderated, and testified during different events regarding the SBIR process and government commercialization efforts. Currently, he is the enterprise chair for the AIAA LA and Las Vegas section. And he will, like I said, be talking much more about the SBIR process specifics and how to go about proposing and getting an award. So I'll turn it over to Dennis now.
Thanks, Brett. Well, here's the my view graphs. Unfortunately, are pretty dense. I'm hoping that people will just download it and look at them later. But because there's a lot of information in here, I've been looking at the process for more than 10 years and talking about it. And it even goes back to some of my previous work when I was a CETA. I was a CETA for the Air Force Research Laboratory in Albuquerque. And they asked me to review some SBIR proposals. And then the same thing happened when I was at JPL for a while. They were asking me to review SBIR programs. So I go back a long ways on this thing, and things have changed somewhat, particularly recently in the last fiscal year. But the bottom line is there's quite a bit of money being spent. The SBIR program is 3.2% of the budget. That comes out of the programs of record primarily. And most of that is the DoD. And the tech transfer, small business technology transfer, is a lot less, but they still spend quite a bit of money. It's divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 is 6 months to a year. And the amounts that could be awarded are anywhere from $50,000 to $256,000. There used to be a limit of about $150,000. The success rate apparently is about 16% in terms of winning. Phase 2 is for prototype development, that's for certain. 24 months, that's the same as it's always been. The number there of the award could be as high as 1.7 million. And you have a pretty good chance of succeeding. In phase 3, there's no SBIR funding, you have to find your own funding. And that's fixated on commercialization. Look at the bottom line number on the bottom of the screen, 5,000 new awards yearly. That's a significant amount. Next slide, please. So the major differences between SBIR and STTR are these. The principal investigator has to be with the small business, and I'll define what the small business concern really is later. It has to be at least 50%. They can subcontract up to a third of the work in phase 1 and a half in phase 2. The other thing that's happened several years ago now, some VCs that are already invested in some of the small businesses that have started up already could be involved with the small business. It's not allowed by everybody, certainly not allowed by the STTR, but that's allowed by a lot of the agencies within DoD. The STTR does require a nonprofit research institution partner. Primarily that's become the universities, but could also be an FFRDC, a federally funded research and development center. And here locally in Greater Southern California, that would be, for example, JPL. Aerospace Corporation is also one, but lately they've been transferring their own technology out. I'm not sure they're doing much partnering with the small business. They don't allow, STTR does not allow VCs to participate. VC is a venture capitalist. Can I have the next chart, please? This is government fiscal year 2019, which then ended in September last month. And here is the breakdown of the agencies that participate in the SBIR program and the STTR program. But the bottom line is, you can see DoD gives out the most money. Now, Health and Human Services has recently expanded their role, primarily, I think, because of the coronavirus pandemic. So they're giving out a lot more grants and contracts. Okay, next chart, please. Now, this is a key thing you have to understand. A contract, usually for you, is a pull mechanism in terms of marketing and sales. And a grant is a push mechanism for marketing and sales. Why do I say that? Well, the contract, each agency is very specific in what they want. That's the topics of focus. So they establish everything, plans, requirements, and the protocols. They use a procurement mechanism, which is primarily a contract. They can invoice on progress, and there's a binding agreement, let me put it that way. And the primary agencies that participate in contracts are at the bottom there: DoD, Department of Health, Department of Homeland Security, NASA, Environmental Protection, Transportation, Education. With the grants, the small business has to initiate the approach to the agency because the topics are not that specific. It's more of an assistance mechanism. It does allow for payments, and it's more flexible. And Health and Human Services does both. But here's the bottom line. Right now, in particular, you need to look at each agency's proposal instructions, because each one is going to be different, even within the DoD, Air Force, Army, Navy, go on down the list. Their proposal instructions are different. They're also allocating money over the period of performance a little bit differently. So while it might be $150,000 total, the Army might give you only $50,000 to start with. And then they might follow it up with 2 phase 1 add-ons so that the total comes to 150. And then the Navy doesn't, I don't think, does that as much. So that's why you need to look at every agency's proposal instructions, and they differ all the time, every year. And typically there are 3 tranches for SBIRs and STTRs. The first one, which will come at the beginning of the fiscal year, which is now because it's October, usually will have most of the money, because usually the agencies know by then how much money they have to spend. But even if there's 3 tranches, and I know usually not more than that, it is possible that an agency could put out a solicitation in the middle of the fiscal year and for a specific bunch of topics. So that's why you got to keep looking at each agency's proposal instructions and the solicitations as well. Okay, next chart. Here's a definition of the small business concern according to the federal government. Independently owned and operated for profit. Location and operation in the United States. That's the main criterion. It could be any one of the legal entities that you see there. Proprietorship, probably not recommended. Partnership, general partner, probably not recommended. Limited liability company, corporation, joint venture, trust, cooperative association, those are all legal. They have to be 51% controlled and operated, owned and operated and controlled by one or more individuals who are citizens or permanent resident aliens. Or you can read the next paragraph. Or the last thing, which is really critical, is that less than 500 employees, including all the affiliates. That's the main criteria. You're also not dominating the field of business. You're focusing on research and development. You cannot use an SBIR or STTR to just purchase equipment or commercialize technology that you or somebody else has already developed. And the technology cannot be that such that it's very low risk, which only needs a little bit of capital, and that it's out there for sale. It doesn't work either. Okay, the next one, please. Well, here's the big advantages. It's the, they fund projects, not companies. You should realize that. This is the free money phrase. You don't pay back SBIR money. It's not a loan. There's no equity taken. The weighted average cost of capital is 0. And if the government wants your product, phase 3 is awarded without any competition. That's a big deal. And I'll go onto this intellectual property rights a little bit more. But they generally protect it at the present time for about 5 years after the award is completed. There's some changes in progress as we speak. Okay, so the intellectual property rights are very favorable. The SBC retains almost everything, but the government usually has a royalty-free license to the technology. The one that might change, because it's in process of discussion right now, is moving it from 5 years of protection to 20. Now, I think with the 5-year limit, it was supposed to be in perpetuity that you had the royalty-free license. Now they're talking about 20 years, and after that, it's open to everybody. But it hasn't made it into the official federal acquisition regulations. It is being proposed and discussed as we speak. And it started in September, it's being looked at again in October. You can see about the patents. They won't disclose the invention for 5 years, but if the previous thing changes to 20, that'll probably change to 20 as well. But one thing is, you exclusively licensed to sell in the US to normally manufacture here domestically. And that's going to come up with some other things I have to point out related to ITAR and some other regulations that are coming up. And next slide, please. I would say these are the key things you need to look at right now before you look at any of the solicitations. The small business concern, the founders of it, you need to do at least these 8 things. You need to form the legal entity. I would suggest an LLC or a corporation, but if the founders are doing most of the work, say, then maybe the LLC is good enough. If you start hiring employees right away, because you're larger, then a corporation is probably going to be the way to go. It's okay to start up in California. You can move to Delaware. Most of the outside investors like Delaware. You need to have a DUNS number. This is again for those companies that are really just starting up. I'm assuming most of the people online here are really in the startup mode and don't know much about this program, and maybe not even founded any kind of a corporation or anything else yet. But if you do, you need the DUNS number. That's easy to get. It's free. You need that for the government work. That's Dun & Bradstreet number. Now, number 3 here, this is kind of not discussed very often, but you need to worry about the financial record, the bookkeeping, basically. If you go with a contract, most of them use a cost accounting system. And if it's Department of Defense related, then I use the Defense Contract Audit Agency for audits of your books, even if you win phase 1. So you have to worry about the chart of accounts. Some things like repayments on credit cards, you cannot charge that to a contract. And there's a difference between cash and accrual bookkeeping, which I'm sure everybody will know what that kind of means, but you should not worry about that as well. But the big thing about financial records, particularly with DoD, they're going to come and audit you at the end of phase 1, or even before you get phase 1. They want to make sure that you're ready to do the right kind of accounting. That's only at the end of phase 1 and going into phase 2. Now, the next three things, 5, 6, and 7, this has become extremely more prominent, particularly in the last 2 fiscal years. I'm sorry, I forgot about marketing. I threw that in because most small businesses who are just technology oriented, I find out that their biggest problem is they don't know how to market and sell. So for these kinds of solicitations, it's up to the small business to get to know the government customer. And again, who is your competition? Even with the SBIR, who's your competition? What are the commercial markets? What about the timing in the markets? The goal is to get to phase 3. I'll keep repeating that, which is a commercialization of the technology. phases 1 and 2 are there to get you the money to do that. So you still need to know your competition, even in the government market, as well as the commercial market. Number 5 is international traffic in arms. They're making a big deal about that lately. So you need to be aware of the rules for product exportation. If you're manufacturing a new version of a bomb, you better look at that list because you might be subject to ITAR. Number 6, this has become more prominent, particularly lately, cybersecurity maturity model certification. They're changing those rules as we speak. The original version of cybersecurity model certification came out of the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And now the DoD is going to be basically required in the next several years to have their acquisition people become knowledgeable about cybersecurity and determine whether or not they should put that into a solicitation before they award the money. Now, hopefully it won't bother the small business people too much, but you never know. And you might have some people in the acquisition community that don't know that much to start with. So they're going to change the rules as I think that I've seen a proposed solicitation that has 5 levels. And then they're going to educate the government people as well. So you need to keep on track of that, even with the SBIR. The next one, 7, is a Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. That's, for example, all the discussion about China investment in the universities, other nonprofits, existing companies, and certainly if you're doing something new for the DoD to an SBIR. So you need to watch those regulations as well. It also requires you to identify if you have an employee that's not working in the United States. So you really need to look at the CFIUS rules as well. It's not just the investments, it's the employees and the contractors. And you might have to identify those people who are working with you, or even under a subcontract, for example. The last thing is make sure you know where you're fitting in the status of the technology. And that means the technology readiness level and manufacturing readiness level. And I'll bring that up on the next page. Thank you. Next page. Now at the top, left to right, is the Department of Defense acquisition process. This applies to all acquisitions within DoD, that including the very big prime contractors. So those phases haven't changed very much. They go from concept refinement and definition to technology development and system development. They have different design readiness reviews, production and deployment, at which they have a full rate production decision review, and then operations to support, which is full up maintenance of the technology if it goes that far. So underneath that, the technology readiness levels and manufacturing readiness levels, which were initially defined by NASA and then have been picked up by the Department of Defense, that's where they fit in. Typically, the DoD doesn't like technology readiness level 1, 2, or 3. They like to have it a little bit further along. 3 is possible. At the end of phase 2, you better be at TRL 4, and then TRL 6 and 7 at the end of phase 3. Similarly, I'm trying to highlight manufacturing readiness level at the end of phase 2, and that would be 4, and then it's 6 at the end of phase 2. That's kind of like what they want to see, and that applies even to the large contractors. So even though they might not ask that in the solicitation, you should know what these levels mean, understand it, and see where you fit, because that'll help you write the proposal. Next slide, please. Now, this is something that's cropped up fairly recently. It's called the Defense SBIR STTR Innovation Portal. It is in the cloud. It was started in December of 2019. And the DoD agencies are all using this cloud entryway for inputs by the SBCs. Now, what they're really looking to do is make the job easier, the DoD agencies, make the job easier for themselves. So when you fill out, when you fill out a proposal, they're going to ask you, what's the name of your company? How are you organized? Do you have any certifications? And then who is your point of contact? All those fundamental administrative things. So what the government agencies have done now, the DoD, have used this portal to get the basic information in to the portal. And if you don't do that, you can't submit the proposal. If you get all the administrative stuff in, and you have to go to login.gov as well, because they're going to interface with this portal. That takes care of a lot of the basic information. That REI company systems does not evaluate proposals. They pass the information along or make it available to the DoD agencies. The DoD agency will always evaluate the proposal from the technology standpoint. And they usually look at the financials as well. But that's what they're doing right now. And this started December last year. And if you don't go through this portal, you won't be able to have your proposal submitted. And they also have a lot of other information available, like the links to the specific agencies and how many solicitations are out there at a given point in time. So they're forcing everybody to go through this thing, and they're paying them to do it, but they didn't used to do things like that. I think the DoD procurement people are trying to make it a little bit easier for themselves because they're getting a lot of proposals. And next chart, please. This is my take on what they really want for DoD. Commercial off-the-shelf items, no. Non-developmental item, no. Commercial off-the-shelf is something you could buy if you're a consumer, as an example. A non-developmental item, there are some definitions that are in the government regulations, but basically, if it's so far along that it only needs a little bit of modification to become an item that can be given to the DoD, that's not under the SBIR kind of what they're looking for. That's not what they're looking for. Basic research, which means like a TRL level 1 and 2, really not favorable either. What they're really looking for is a developmental item around TRL 3, but less than 6. And something that has been developed for the commercial sector in a prototype fashion or even production, and then modified to meet DoD requirements. Those are the kind of things they're really looking for. It's an MRL 6. I don't think that's changed very much. And the next chart, please. Now, some of the things I put here, this is some clues for the actual writing of the proposal. These things, a lot of the things are not explicitly asked for. The whole goal is to get to phase 3. Okay, that's why I have that on the right, whatever that product is. But I've heard the agencies, Army, Navy, Air Force, bring up in their discussions in general, and this is at the top level of the Army and the Navy, not just the acquisition people. These are the people that run the SBIR program for the agencies, saying things like this. They're going to look at the qualifications of the team, the founders, employees, contractors, who you're going to affiliate with, supply chain people. Okay, they're going to look at how many resources do you have available to you now? Are you already off and running because you got some money? Did somebody die and leave you a large amount of money to start up your company so you could invest it in the company? Do you have equipment that could be used? Do you have a facility that could be used already? Can you go to a facility that you know that your cousin owns and lets you in for free? Do you have patents? Do you have external money? In the marketing and sales, they never bring this up. But if you had, for example, a letter of support, let's say for one of the primes, that'd be something to put in this proposal. You need to know what your competition is. As I said earlier, that's the competition in general for the product that you're trying to produce ultimately to get to phase 3, and also for the small businesses that are competing for SBIRs. And you can search around because the web is available now, and it wasn't like that 20 years ago. It's a lot easier to do the research. Do you know who the government agency point of contact is for the solicitation? And do you know what the program of record is? That's the POR. And what is your path to commercialize? So if you don't have anybody that's in your founding team that's working marketing and sales, you better get somebody to help. Otherwise, hopefully one of the founders can do this as well. I mean, you could subcontract it, but it's a matter of money. Now, the product, they're going to want to know about what is the prototype going to look like at the end of phase 2? And can you do test and evaluation? Do you have a plan? So the more of these things you can put in the proposal, even though it might not be asked for explicitly, the better it's going to look. There's another little thing that I heard, and this was the Army agency. He even said, once again, and I heard this a long time ago, you got to read the proposal instructions completely and do what they asked for. And the Army guy said, if the proposal asked for you to submit the document in 12-point font with 1-inch margins all the way around with Times New Roman font, you better do it. Because he said, if you don't do it, and there's a choice between you and the other company that's done it, they might pick the other company. So that's how explicit some of these proposal instructions are. The ones I have on this chart, typically not that explicit. They don't really ask for all of these things. But the more you can address implicitly or explicitly, the better off you're going to be. The next chart, please. Okay, phase 3 commercialization. This is usually what happens. You fall into the hole and nothing happens after phase 2. Otherwise, you have to sell to the government or business to business. I call it B2G, B2B. Next chart. Now, here's the government's definition of commercialization. Again, I don't make this up. Developing processes, products, technologies, services, and production and delivery of those same things or services for sale to or use by the federal government or the commercial market. So the federal, if you do that, federal government, that's the B2G. Commercial market is B2B. It is not usually to the consumer market. Now, I agree with that, but I've never seen really a good metric of what does success mean. And some of these agencies need to report better on what that means because it's taken them a long time to report on that and they haven't really done it. So the return on investment as a whole would be a good metric, but I haven't seen that much of it. Next chart, please. Now, if you go to sell to the government for phase 3, you really need to align yourself with the program of record. You need to know who's in charge, what agency specifically, down to the program executive officer. An example would be Space and Missile Systems Center, billions and billions of dollars of contracting. That don't really work very well with the small businesses, by the way. But I'll use it as an example anyway. They have colonels in charge of the program. And he gets all this money. They might be able to build Earth observation satellites for spying. You know, go down the list. They do all of that all over there. They also work the National Reconnaissance Office. That's where they get their money. So the program of record managed by the program executive officer, well, guess what? That's where the SBIR money comes out of. He gets taxed at 3.2%. It's been going that way for a long time. In the past, they didn't, they were pissed off about it, I'll put it bluntly. And they couldn't do much about it. I don't think they can do anything about it either right now. It might be a little more cooperative than the past, but it's very hard to get a hold of the colonel unless you really want to track them down. A lot of these agencies do have once a year, maybe more frequently, meetings for the small business people, so the small business people know what the programs are that are coming out of the various agencies. But again, so you need to align with the program in order to get really a phase 3 pot of money. So the technology needs to be at TRL 6 at the end of phase 2, MRL 6 at the end of phase 2 for reducibility. And then by the time, if you get phase 3, you should be at TRL 7, MRL 7. They are really trying to force you to ally with a prime contractor. That hasn't changed very much, unless you are possibly at a level of, at the 500 employee level. Most small businesses that got SBIRs and STTRs, from my recollection, have been under 100 employees. Majority have been under 50 employees. So if you get to be large enough, but still fulfill the less than 500 people employee record, you could avoid possibly aligning with the prime if your prototype is really good and they really want it. And then once again, the money has to be sought from outside funding. There's no money from the government directly for phase 3, unless they give you a program on your own. In other words, they're going to pay you as if you were a real a large contractor. Next chart, please. Now, if you're selling to the businesses, business to business at phase 3, then you have a lot more options. And there's about 8 of them there. Now, direct sales is probably the best one. You can license for the non-government market. You can ally with the prime, even with the business to business sales, but there are other alliances possible. Now you're talking about a commercial market. So in other words, a prime contractor that doesn't do business directly with the government, that's possible. Joint ventures, I don't think are very desirable right now. Captive company, it depends upon the state of affairs with venture capital and private equity. Captive company, same thing. Joint venture, same thing. Divestment, if you only have an SBIR product, that's unlikely. Same thing with mergers and acquisitions, unless, again, you go back to be business and government, and then the big company is doing business with the government already. But then that would default back to business to government rather than business to business. You could become a value chain partner. Suppose your product really would fit in more for you as your small business as being a supply chain company. Then your product with sufficient advancement could then be made available to a prime contractor or a commercial large contractor. Communications is one thing that comes to mind. Photonics area is another thing. And then for the non-government market, licensing, particularly if you have a patent. Next chart, please. Okay, there are other ways right now going on to get money. So those are 3 of them. Other transaction authority, the pitch fest I have to bring up, and I'll tell you why in a minute, and certain other things that are other deals. Next chart, please. Another transaction authority for prototype actually was started by NASA in the late 50s. So it's been going on a long time, but it's only been picked up by the Department of Defense and other government agencies prominently in the last 4 years or so. It is not a contract or a grant or a cooperative agreement. The rules are kind of loose, and it's up to the acquisition authority to determine what they really want to do with this, if they're going to use it. A lot of different entities can participate. Consortia are the prominent mechanism right now. There must be maybe 24 consortia right now. Teaming is encouraged. They'd like you to team with prime contractors because the prime contractor gets a benefit out of it. And the other thing is a lot of the clauses that would be mandatory, they don't flow down if you're using a subcontractor. So what is a prototype? Could be a real piece of hardware. And I think right now they like that more than anything else. However, they also like information technology related products. And they're also shifting a little bit to virtual reality, augmented reality. So the software stuff is becoming of interest because it's being talked about so much. It cannot be for low rate initial production, as they call it. If you go back to the chart where I had the DoD procurement mechanism, low rate initial production would be after a major contract was awarded. For example, the F-35 contract or the B-2 bomber contract. They start out with low rate initial production and then they go into full rate. You can't do that with a prototype. So they want the lowest possible quantity for proof. The big thing, which I've X'd out, no federal acquisition regulations, no DCAA audits, no defense contract regulations, defense federal acquisition regulations. So a lot of the stuff that made it complex for the small business, and one of the reasons why the small business didn't want to join working on DoD contracts would be pushed aside with a prototype. So the award is usually firm fixed price, not a contract, but it's flexible, negotiable, usually has milestone payments. Profit is allowed. That's kind of a variable thing. If it was a full up federal acquisition regulation involved, the contract, nobody can charge more than 15% for profit. I don't think that's changed in 1,000 years. And usually it's not even that much. So the profit might be a little bit more if you can get away with it under a prototype, OTA for prototype. Again, IP, intellectual property data rights are negotiable. You can also get another OTA. But the big thing, which is the last column, is the follow-on. They may award a direct contract for production. In other words, they looked at your prototype. Remember, can't be low rate initial production. And now they really like it. So they're going to say, oh, give me that. And then they might give you a contract for production without competition. That's a big deal. It might be another OT of the transaction authority or other transaction. And it may or may not be using federal acquisition regulations. But there is where you want to go if you go with OTAs. Now, I'll just toss this on the side. There's a big consortium, the Space and Missile Systems Center in El Segundo. It's called the Space Enterprise Consortium. And I try to lead a team to go after that consortium to manage the consortium. Did not win it. Another agency has gotten it. That company is back in North Carolina. I think it's Raleigh Durham area. And they've got about 6 or 7 consortia. And they're running a lot of stuff for the government agencies. So the government likes these consortia and the small business can join it for $500 usually. And then you can find out what's going on inside and you can figure out what you want to do from there. Sometimes they give awards to small businesses. My understanding is most of the consortia awards are still going to the primes. Can I have the next chart, please? So under the OTA, you need to be a non-traditional defense contractor, which means you have not performed or received for at least 1 year a contract or subcontract for DoD, subject to the full cost accounting standards. That usually means a small business. Nonprofits are also eligible. The traditional defense contractor can get an OTA that would be like a prime contractor. But then they need to have at least one non-traditional participate. New technologies, or on significant amount of labor. By participating with the lead, you're reducing the cost and schedule overall, and you're helping increase the performance. And again, the usual is the entity, usually a traditional defense contractor. If they go after an OTA, then they have to put up 1/3 cost share. And that would apply to the primes. Now, there's one other thing going on right now, which is kind of another little bit of a change. This is why OTAs are very flexible, but very lucrative and good for the small business to pursue, is that the acquisition executive, again, like the program executive officer on a program of record, can determine under certain circumstances to use an OTA if he doesn't think it's feasible, appropriate with a FAR-based federal acquisition regulation contract. So there's a way in there, particularly if you know who's doing what at the program executive office level. Next chart, please. I had to bring up the Pitch Fest because the Air Force and the Space Force are presently using them quite a bit. Now, the Space Force has just stood up this year, and they then, of course, are different now from the Air Force. But the acquisition portion of the Space Force is not fully clear yet. In other words, it's not been fully organized. So therefore, they don't know where the money is coming from. It's not that they haven't, the Space Force hasn't asked for the money from Congress. It just hasn't been appropriated specifically to the acquisition portion, at least that part, because they don't know how they're organized yet. So Space and Missile Systems Center, for example, is also going to definitely be part of the Air Force, Space Force, and they will still be in charge of acquisition for the large companies. But where does the Missile Defense Agency fit in? What about the DARPA? I guess is a state apart. There's a Space Development Agency, which was under Secretary of Defense Research Engineering. I think that's going to go underneath the Space Force. Does that mean the money that was appropriated already under SDA fully goes to the Space Force? Don't know. So what they've been doing, and this was started by the Air Force as these pitch fests, they usually use some independent outside organization to manage the event. They really like things for free, by the way. So the agency screens the technology, that is the Space Force would screen it, or the Air Force, or the Army, or the Navy, and they notify the SBC to attend at some predetermined location. And then they could award money on the spot to the winners of the pitch fest. Now, the Air Force did this in New York City about 18 months ago, or less than 2 years ago. Why they went to New York City, I don't know. There's no interest in the New York City area, even from investors in space, or DoD even. But they went there, and they invited something like 140 to 150 companies. I presume they had to travel on their own money. Now, if they liked at the end of the pitch fest what they heard, the Air Force used their version of an ATM card and gave out $153,000 or some number like that to the SBC on the spot. Okay, so that's what they were doing with the Air Force. And that was under a certain person, Will Roper, who used an agency called AFWERX. And I think AFWERX is going to go to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which has been traditionally the Air Force agency of all the SBIR and STTR. But that's going to change as well. Some of the Air Force research labs are going to go underneath the Space Force. So again, it's another way of things to be determined. The Space Force intends to have a pitch fest at SMC in the spring of 2021. It's going to be held locally in the greater Southern California area. But again, since they haven't figured out how they're going to fund everything, a lot of things are up in the air. But what they did is they put out through that Defense Innovation Portal, Defense Systems Innovation Portal, an SBIR solicitation asking for those who want to go to that pitch fest to submit a proposal for 2021. Does it make any sense? Not to me, but that's what they've been doing. So they're going to, the government agency will review the technical part, and then they're going to use other transition partners to vet the companies, because the government agencies usually don't know how to do that. It's just that simple. So they invite angels, private investors, corporate venture capital, and incubators, accelerators. So at those pitch fests, if you decide to go to one of those, be careful, because at that point in time, you need to decide whether or not you want to partner with these private investors, corporate venture capital angels. The corporate venture capital people, by the way, would include the primes, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, you go down the list. So you'd have to be wary of this. Next chart, please. Okay, this is the last chart that has any real content, but they've been government agencies have been doing CRADAs for a very long time, Cooperative Research and Development Agreement. There is no money provided from the government agency if you agree to work with them on a CRADA. So keep that in mind. There are other ways to do business with the government agencies, the labs, and the federally funded research and development centers. Again, not an FFRDC around here is JPL under NASA. There's MITRE, Aerospace Corporation, those are FFRDCs. The labs include those labs under the Department of Energy. And so there's a lot of labs that you could go to if you would like to use their facility to do test and evaluation. But everything's kind of up in the air, and usually they don't pay you to come over. And Brett has already talked about tech licensing. There's also a memorandum of understanding. No money is transferred either way. They allow you to come in and use the facility, maybe. You could get some of those labs to consult for you. Then you'd have to pay them. It's usually by a contract. There's a whole bunch of other miscellaneous agreements. Clinical trials, that would be for Health and Human Services, Department of Education, material trials. There's other little things like that. But most of these I wouldn't recommend for the small businesses starting up, because they really don't provide money most of the time to their business. So it's not the free money in the sense of the SBIR or STTR program. That's going to be the basis of the talk. I have one last slide for fun. If you still have any questions, refer to Zoltar, put your money in the slot, ask him a question, and Zoltar speaks and gives you the answer to your question. That's what I use as a last resort. I've seen these machines around in some of the lobbies of major hotels. And then my contact information is last year. Again, I'm the chair of the enterprise program for the AIAA section. And I've cooperated with many IEEE sections around here, all the way down to San Diego, Orange County, coastal section, universities, all kinds of nonprofits, and affiliate with LAEDC, as an example, USC Economic School. So I have a lot of experience in a lot of different things relating to startups. So I've been looking at this for a very long time, and those are the kind of services that I provide, is helping the startups and small businesses. Thanks, Brett.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Dennis. So now, if anyone has any questions, we'll do a really quick question and answer period. We've gotten the question a couple times if the recording of this will be made available. And yes, it will be made available on a number of different links. Ken, what's the best way to share the recording with everyone who attended?
Typically, the links I mentioned in the chat are the general links. You can find there, but the specific link will be emailed to all the attendees after it's posted. So okay. It will be emailed.
Right. There are some links in the chat right now where you can find the YouTube channel and a number of different videos up, and you will be able to eventually find this video on there. But like Ken said, it will also be emailed out to anyone who RSVP'd. So now do we have any questions for either Dennis or myself before we do the raffle? If you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat, or I think you can raise your hand and we can give you control to speak as well. Okay, so here's a question. How can I start my own aerospace company as a non-US citizen in the US? So I'll tackle that first. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from starting your own aerospace company as a non-US citizen. However, a lot of these resources that we shared, such as some of these SBIR funding sources, will be either not available or will be more difficult to obtain. Dennis, do you know any of the specifics around SBIR awards for US-based companies that are started by non-citizens?
Yeah, the DoD probably doesn't like that at all, but there's the that issue I brought up about the CFIUS, and in particular because they're questioning that exactly. Are you a non-US citizen? Are you employing non-US citizens, or are they full up, visas, living and residing here? They also don't like if you're using a subcontractor or somebody from outside the country, no matter what it is. With the exception being, I'd say the Five Eyes, which are United States, Canada, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand. And then even with Germany, France, and the others, which are not the Five Eyes, that's the others that we're affiliated with. From a strategic standpoint, they might question that as well. They don't want to see the technology being exported, and they want to see everything that's potentially against phase 3 manufactured here. So you might have some difficulty there. NASA is a little more flexible, I would say, but they might have to adhere to some of these regulations as well. Need to keep it on top of that CFIUS stuff. That's all I can say at the moment.
We had a participant offer an answer to this question as well. So Ava, I'm going to give you control if you want to go ahead and answer with what you had in mind. You're currently—
Just a moment. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen, for a great event, and nice to see you again. As you can hear in my voice, I am an immigrant, proud American citizen, but I was facing similar reality. And what I found to be the most expeditious is to find 2 American citizens as co-founders of the company, which preferably would have to hold a majority shares, so the company is not controlled by so-called foreign entity or a foreign citizen. And it is also terrific to invite American citizens with unique American way of thinking and structuring entrepreneurship as your partners. So this is how I dealt with the situation that I faced in my life. Also, it is possible to attract corporate ventures, especially of those American corporations who are very tilted towards international business and who like to sponsor foreign entrepreneurs. And of course, those companies are Intel, Qualcomm, speaking of areas close to the industry. And also Google has been extremely proactive in securing participation in either acquiring or funding companies started by immigrants, by foreign people. So this is my pragmatic experience.
Thank you, Ava. I appreciate it. We're going to move on to the next question now. We have Irvin had raised his hand, so 1 second, and I will. All right, Irvin, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Hi. Yeah, thank you for the information. I've always been curious and interested in how one goes about starting a company, and I have no clue. So thank you for this. But my question is like, yeah, what is the first step? Perhaps, I have an idea, and I have some kind of like aerospace background, but that's pretty much it. Like, what would be the next steps?
If you have just an idea and you're at an idea stage, then
Yeah.
I would say the first steps are to do some of the customer discovery interviews that I talked about a little bit during my presentation. I mentioned the NSF I-Corps program is really good for outlining this process, but you don't actually have to be a part of an NSF I-Corps program to start reaching out and talking to potential customers and stakeholders, because the only way to really know if an idea that you have is a good idea is to get feedback from the people who would be giving you money for that idea. So I think that that's probably your first step, is to evaluate if there's actually a fit for this in the market, and if it's worth pursuing. So I don't know if you've done much of that customer discovery yet. And a lot of these interviews you can do with stakeholders, LinkedIn is a very powerful tool for setting up an interview like this with people in a relevant field that would possibly be contributing or purchasing the technology that you're developing. So I would encourage you to look up the NSF I-Corps program, take a look at what their aims and goals are, and even if you don't participate in the program yourself, you can kind of follow their model for how to do some customer discovery of your own.
Okay.
Did you have any?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, and now we had, were there any other questions? It looks like that's about it, which actually fills up our time nicely.
Yeah, Brad, I think there is one in Q&A. Do you see the Q&A box?
Yes, I do. It's not a question really, it's so much.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay.
Some contact info for Ava, who gave us that answer earlier. Okay, so with that then, I'll announce the winners of our raffle that we also had for the 2 Amazon gift cards tonight. They were Athena Gibbons and Irvin Romo. So if you are a raffle winner, please send me an email at this email address on the screen. I'll also put it in the chat. And we will get you your $50 Amazon gift card as well. So Athena Gibbons and Irvin Romo, please send me an email and we'll get you your gift card. And so that's it. So thank you to everyone who attended.
Brett, let me make one last comment. It just occurred to me.
Go ahead.
Since one of the questions was about aerospace, that includes aviation. So non-citizens might be starting up an electric propelled, a hydrogen propelled airplane, and it'd probably be easier for them to start a company in that business, not necessarily go after government contracting, because it still has to be cautious. But don't forget aviation; it's not just space.
Okay. Well,
Thanks.
great. So thank you to everyone for attending, and thanks Dennis for your presentation, and thank you to Ken for helping to organize the Zoom platform. So with that, I'll say goodnight to everyone. And again, the 2 raffle winners, please send me an email at the email address on the screen to claim your Amazon gift card. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Good night and good luck.